I'm Dan Rose. A Client's Guide to Surviving Therapy is a little bit of therapy on my own as I run into a variety of different forms of toxicity and garbage from some of my own therapists in recent times. So I want to just, I guess, a little bit of background. I've worked with roughly 40 practitioners, 25 or so quite verbally, the rest more physiologically in some way or other. That includes energy work, so energy medicine, several practitioners in that form, several practitioners who do energy work that were just born with it and don't quite have a name, Reiki, acupuncture, Qigong. Then there's homeopathy, that's a form of energy work. Then there's a variety of talk therapy, constellation therapy. Then there's chair work, where you lay the different parts of the psyche out in a circle of different chairs and move around and dialogue with one another. Then there's, 1,000 hours of different media I've consumed in different books and, channeled work and channeled meditation, inner child work. Different work like with John Bradshaw and some of his shame work. Then there's, of course, massage and stretching and yoga and couples work. And then there's just talking. And what I'm doing here is actually a form of therapy as well. It's video therapy, where you just sit down with a camera and perhaps with some notes and perhaps just endedly speaking, because it's a different persona that comes forth than the writing persona. But there's also, tens of thousands of work, of hours with, or tens of thousands of pages of journaling, and also poetry, thousands of poems, drawing, etc. And what we're looking at are different slices of data sets from different angles that reveal more of the whole, that bring more of the whole to consciousness through language. The conscious mind is enabled through language, meaning if you do not have language for it, you cannot be conscious of it. You can see something as a picture, but before the other part of your brain that understands it can understand it, you've got to describe the picture to yourself or another in such a way that the language part of it registers it. And part of this is that the memory centers of the brain are primarily, consciously are in language. If you just have, patterns that don't have any words associated to them, they disappear quite rapidly from memory. And when you go searching for them, it's hard to pull up a pattern unless it has a pattern of words correlated with it. So that's a little bit of, the background with which I'm coming into this. And the first thing I want to say is that you must do most of the work in a dynamic way for any therapy to be effective. Even before that, good therapy begins with a diagnosis. A diagnosis is a picture in language of what is out of balance. So, for example, if you're giving constantly and are exhausted, and you've got blocks up around receiving or people aren't reciprocating, there's an asymmetry. So that circle of giving and receiving in balance is being elongated into an asymmetry in which you're giving more than you're receiving. That creates dis-ease. When you take a symmetrical circle and you elongate it, you create dis-ease. And the question is how to restore that to balance. Now, what a diagnosis is simply an assessment of the pattern in a way that reveals that which is asymmetrical, which is out of symmetry. So, as I say, a diagnosis could be overextending oneself or underextending oneself, because when you look through the paradigm of balance, first of all, the reason that we're looking for symmetry is that the wheel, the sphere, is the most elegant shape. It has the most grace and motion. So when you've got a spherical shape, you can move forward with the least amount of effort, with the least amount of unnecessary suffering. Think of it like breathing. For example, if a doctor saw you going you would be more and more diseased by emphasizing the in-breath and not letting it out. Similarly, if you're pushing it out, you're going to get more and more worked up, because the ease is in the equal in-breath and out-breath. And so that's what you're getting back to. One of the reasons that meditation comes back to the breath is it's actually teaching this. Many parts of reality are fractal or holographic. And as a result, what's happening in one area of life tends to migrate over to another. So if you're terrified of not having enough money, and so you're carefully holding on to every penny, you're going to simultaneously find yourself tighter in your body. Tighter in your body, you're going to stop giving the full breath out. And so if you change the breath, you also then relax the body. And you also then develop a healthier relationship with money, where things can go in and go out with more grace. And so that's your return to symmetry. So you do not want to begin influencing a pattern until you understand it enough to see where it's out of balance. For example, you don't want to go to a doctor that automatically says just drink more water, or eat more salt, or eat less salt, or breathe in more deeply. You want to go to someone who has the capacity, and it's a good thing to develop ourselves, who has the capacity to see where the asymmetry is first. You look at the body, the doctor will say, stand up straight. If he sees you leaning off to one side, he sees where the asymmetry is. And instantly, she knows that, there's a problem. It could be here, here, and here. And they start figuring out what's taking the body into a crooked shape. Now, why are they bringing the body back to a straight shape? Because that's the most graceful shape. That's the most elegant shape. It takes the least amount of energy for all the muscles to maintain a perfectly vertical body. It takes lots of energy to some muscles pull over to the side, then others have to cramp back the other way. The body is fighting gravity, and you're spending enormous amounts of energy to maintain asymmetry. This is another clue into the mental-emotional domain, because the physical body is a denser octave of the mental-emotional body. And so if something is going on physically, a good default to assume is that it is going on mentally and emotionally first. Now, it is not always going on causally, mentally and emotionally, because reality is created by causing it. Like I'm going to move this hand over to here, but it is also caused by allowing it. Someone else says, I'm going to move that finger over here, and you just let it move. So for the finger to move from here to here, I've either got to move it or I've got to allow it to be moved. Now, it doesn't matter whether I cause it or allow it. If it moves, that's the new reality. and I've participated in that reality by causing it or allowing it. Now, the conscious mind is, of course, in relationship with the unconscious mind. 99.9% of all that we are is unconscious. 99.9% of the entire universe is unconscious. And there is a correlation between those because we are a participant in a larger ecology called the universe by us as part of that larger ecology. Meaning the air we breathe is part of the universe. The food we breathe, we take in and shit out is part of the universe. The liquid we drink, the clothing we wear, the bodies we borrow. We borrow this body from the earth and we give it back to the earth when we are done. The other species and people on the earth that influence us came from the earth as well and will return to the earth. We are a part of a large ecology. However, the conscious mind is like a telescope, and so it's looking out at reality and seeing a tiny bit of the system we are a part of. So we are a part of a vast system. We are a tiny part of the vast system, and the ego is saying, this is me, I'm this part, but it's looking out at the rest of us as that part over there. And so in this sense, when we attack the earth, when we attack ourselves, it's the same thing. The earth gave rise to us. We are part of the earth. When we attack this body, we attack the earth. When we attack the earth, put poison gas in the air, cut down trees, suddenly we attack our own body because now we're breathing poison air and we're not getting fresh oxygen from the tree we just cut down. And so we're participants in a larger ecology, and we're sometimes cancerous participants. A cancer is a disattuned entity. A cancer is a disattuned entity. And so when we create patterns of energy that have nothing to do with the surrounding environment, we are behaving on the earth like a cancer, because a cancer is a very rapidly moving organism within the physical body that doesn't care about the physical body. It just says, hey, I've got things to do. I'm going to make more of myself. And I don't care about the liver. I don't care about the bones. I don't care about the blood vessels. I want to grow the way I want to grow, and I'm going to do it. And fuck everyone else. So that's cancer for you. And when it erupts in the physical body, that's exactly what it does. It starts replicating very rapidly, doesn't care about anyone else. And you say, oh, I don't want you there. And it's like, fuck you, I don't care. I'm doing my thing. And this is very much like an American on the planet. You know, we're doing this thing. We're going to cut down these forests. Da, da, da. And I somewhat tongue-in-cheek, since I'm an American, point attention there because in the United States we hold we're kind of at the end of the continuum that emphasizes the individual. So you go to some place like Thailand and you'll find incredible regard for family, for ancestors, for aspects of the country, for the kingdom, a willingness to make sacrifices to help the monks. There's an incredible appreciation for history and tradition. It's 4,000 years old. And so the family in many ways trumps the individual. And so, it would be a lower cancer society, which it is. It's not, one way or the other, but it is a lower, it's it's attuning more to the larger rhythms. Where on the other side, you have America, which emphasizes the individual. It's all about me. It's all about right now. It's all about my latest idea. And this is often discordant. Even our definition of modern art is like, how can we break everything open? Like, let's do a broomstick upside down. Why? Well, just because nobody's done it before. And so this is kind of a cancerous attitude towards the system. It's never been done before. No one else is doing it. It's new and improved, although the improving aspect is often self-referential. It's new, therefore it must be better. I did it because it's new. And so there's some of that, thrust from the American side of the world's global cultural spectrum. Thailand more about traditional, American new and improved. Thailand more about family, America more about me. So that on that side, there is a continuum of growth and rhythm that is partly about attunement, because it's not that cancer, for example, is inherently bad. It is an energy system, but it's growing faster than, for example, the surrounding cells around it, which is why it starts to consume the body. And so, this is a paradigm through which to look. You look through any lens like heart, mind, and body, and we can say that, for example, in the United States, the mind gets a lot of attention, then the body, the heart, comes a distant third. So to heal the individual in America, you're going to look towards the heart. You're going to look towards tenderness. You're going to look towards the feminine. We're a very masculine culture, so you're going to look towards the feminine as the remedy for the asymmetry of going to school and spending 1,000 hours training your mind and not a single hour training your heart. Well, you say, no. Well, you look at kindergarten, grade school, middle school, high school, college, and you say, did I learn a single hour about how to feel? Did a teacher sit me down and explain the definition between feelings and emotions, between expansive and contractive emotion, to how to read the instrument of the human heart? Did anyone explain any of this to me? And you say, I think I went through the entire education system without learning a single feeling, other than that it's bad to be emotional in school. Well, there you have your asymmetry. So you have enormous suffering stemming from an education protocol that systemically shames the feminine and shames feelings, while elevating thoughts, and particularly sociopathic, witty thoughts. A lot of our humor is a cut into feelings, meaning the nervous laughter that accounts for a certain percentage of comedy in the Western world is attacks at the slower, more feminine aspects of life, and a showing off of the more sociopathic elements. So like a male comedian might take his child, and of course we have a tender feeling around a child. So in order to elicit a nervous laugh from the audience, he'll say something shocking. I hate my kid. My kid was roaming around there and I gave him a kick. I just want to kill him, And this when you have a tension and a rift, like, wow, that's really sociopathic, you're either going to get upset or you're going to laugh. And because it's a comedy show, the audience is kind of cued to laugh around that shock. But it's another symptom of the denigration of feelings in our culture. So that's an easy place to look. Chauvinism as the deepest form of valuing the masculine energy, the yang, the point. Get to the point. I'm busy, let's get this done. Let's get it done. that masculine yang energy in men and in women elevated to a pinnacle of productivity, units per hour. I made 10,000 widgets per hour. Well, I got it up to 11,000 widgets. Well, you get a raise because you're turning more of nature into things. And that's what we want to do. And then we want to sell those things as commodities. We want to make the sale. Okay, so there's a very strong masculine influence in all this. And so if you want to heal and create symmetry, it's, well, where's the long humming? Where's the silent cuddle? Where's the drifting around with no particular plan in mind? Because this is the way that dis-ease and asymmetry balances out. Because when you work hard and then you have long stretches in bed and you run fast and then you sit and are still, there you have balance. When you move and are still, when you're active and quiet, when you're connecting with others and connecting with yourself. So we're looking for symmetry. So you don't want to begin work, and just to give you a couple examples, I've heard multiple people over multiple times tell me, you don't drink too much water. You can drink too much. It depletes your vitamins. Drink more water, drink more water. But neither people actually do the test to see about your body. You have the low sodium diet, like don't eat so much salt. Don't too much salt, low salt, everyone. Only to discover that, for example, my body doesn't have enough salt. Or the raw food diet, eat the raw food diet, and then you get indigestion and, start farting a lot and feeling queasy and all the nuts, etc., aggravate certain things. And so it's just, in other words, you don't want to look to a mantra or a dogma. You want to look to something that is attuning to where you are. And ideally, if you understand that we're all unbalanced to some degree, that our culture is imbalanced, that our families are imbalanced, that our lives are unbalanced, what we're looking to is to move towards symmetry, which is moving towards grace, which means we're moving towards a reality where we spend the least amount of energy to create the maximum amount of well-being. And so this is the challenge, and this is what healing is. So a professional is someone who can guide you on that path, and in exchange for money, will give you dedicated time in service to that end. Now, a scam, intentionally or otherwise, is someone who will take your money to lead you in a certain direction, whether or not that is good for you, and can make things worse. And that brings me to the next thing, because for all his faults, Timothy Leary participated in a study while he was at Harvard, I believe, in which he studied a group of people who were taking therapy. And he also studied a group of people, a control group, I think it was around 100 people, who were not doing therapy. And so this was whatever therapy was going on, at the time in the 60s or whatever. So at the end of the study, a third of the people had improved, a third of the people were about the same, and a third of people were worse off in both groups. In other words, there was no statistical significance in the group that did or did not take the therapy. And this brings up a point that I want to make, which is look to the science. Statistical probability fields are your friend. Meaning, if you're wanting anyone to make money, you don't send them to Vegas, because the statistics are stacked against you. Now, if you send 100 people to Vegas to make money, and they all place 100 bets, maybe one of them will come out with more money than they arrive. 99% of them are going to lose money. And that's, you want to follow the statistics. Don't look for the lone example. some quack has blended up this weird seaweed with this weird that, and this one person, the miracle cure. That's great. Maybe it had some trace mineral that person really needed at a particular point, etc. But that does not mean that everyone should be doing that. It doesn't mean they shouldn't either. Look to the statistics. And this brings up one of the biggest vulnerabilities in this field. And it's basically this, that almost because of this principle of balance, because of this paradigm of symmetry and asymmetry, almost everyone will have something that will benefit them. Another way, I guess a more useful way of putting that, is whatever the cure, providing it's not arsenic or something like that, there's likely to be someone who receives some benefit in some way. That's not what we're looking for. I mean, yes, we want everyone to have benefit in some way, but the fact that someone benefited, and often this starts with the healer themselves, the practitioner. So-and-so tries raw food, it doesn't work for them. Then they try Reiki, it didn't work for them. They went to a massage therapist, it didn't work for them. And then they stumble across this little niche activity or this little niche product, and they take it, and whether it causes the change or not, there is a shift. Like they notice, right around the time I took that or did this, bing, things shifted. And they tell all their friends, and their friends say, wow, that's wonderful. You should market this. You should be a healer. And in a rather simplistic way, this becomes the new thing. Everyone should try this because, no, I did right. That wasn't, none of that worked. You've got to try this. You've got to stand on your heel and lean back like this, and at the full moon, do this. And do you feel it? Do you feel it? And one of the things that can go on here when you've got someone who believes, because synchrony or it actually did work for them for a variety of reasons. As I say, you can, for example, have a salt deficiency, and you're consuming large amounts of seaweed, and you think it's the seaweed, it just gave you the salt you needed that you weren't using in another way. And so unfortunately, we're in a culture where almost none of this gets the science it deserves. Now, that's not to knock the seaweed, if that's the case, because yes, pursuing seaweed did get the salt you needed, or it got the iron or whatever it was that was in there, and you may think it was the this or the that. It doesn't matter as long as it works. But this is somewhat of a fragile point for the conscious mind, because reality is way more complex than our conscious minds are. Even billion-dollar drug releases from pharmaceuticals have so many ripple effects throughout the body, and we know so little about the body, that they often cause way more harm than good. You often risk, 1 in 30 goes blind, but 30 for 30 cures diarrhea. But is it worth a 1 in 30 chance of going blind because you want to stop the diarrhea quicker? It's not a good trade-off. So yes, it does this, but it has this other effect. And so, major drug companies spending, $1 billion on a drug either don't get this data, or if they do, they cover it up because they've invested $1 billion in the drug and, want to get their money back. And so they suppress the fact that the side effects are way more costly, than something else. And all of this is to say we're dealing with a complex world. But the coming back to the core point, you want to do a diagnosis. This seems out of whack. I'm hyperfrenetic, but I can't calm down. That's out of whack. I'm very lethargic, I'm very relaxed, but I can't get out of bed. That's out of whack. I'm depressed. I'm hyperanxious. Out of whack. You're looking for the symmetry. You're looking for the cycle, the breath in, the breath out, the up and the down, the movement and the stillness, the out and the in. That's the point we want to be. So a good practitioner is going to try and locate that point by asking questions. How are you sleeping? How are your dreams? The more data points, the more you can paint a picture. Well, I can't calm down. My dreams are all of being raped. I'm terrified of men. You see the picture is starting to emerge? We're already at a point where there's a 50% probability there's a repressed sexual abuse. But then it goes on. I have these, when I draw, I kind of see penises. When it's getting up to 70%, and then, my sister said something about this. Now it's up to 95% chance we've got to repress. But you see, the picture emerges from multiple data points, all leaning in the same direction. I can't stop thinking about this. The words that want to come out are these. The dreams are having are these. I keep wanting to do this. I keep being drawn back into relationships like this. You're looking for a complete imbalance. It's all pointing to this direction over here, and where we want to be is here. Now, this brings up another thing, and it's a tricky thing, and it's your homework, frankly, because to be honest, you're going to have to know some of this well enough that you can go head to head with a professional that doesn't know that they don't know their job. Meaning, this in the healing modalities, there are enough people that have inaccurate correlations, meaning, going back to that seaweed salt analogy, that they think it's, the trace mineral here, but it's really the salt. Or the other way around. You can have someone eating rock salt, like the Himalayan pink salt, etc., and they think they need more salt in their body because they feel better, but it's really a trace mineral. It can go both ways when you have these correlations. You can have you can have an abusive partner that is psychologically damaging you, but the sex is balancing your brain chemistry. So you feel better after the interaction because your brain chemistry has been damaged, even though you're being driven crazy. So you're being psychologically damaged and physically benefited simultaneously. And which do you pay attention to, and how do you correlate that? Really, it's both. Your ideal course of action would be to mitigate the psychological abuse, teach your partner to respect you, or find another partner and have more sex and have a healthier and better psychological perspective. So this is key to a response. So the core principle here is you're looking for mathematical symmetry rather than cultural normalcy, because the culture is usually the biggest disease in the room. You have a culture where we don't talk about shame. And so you talk about shame and people start acting out because it's not normal. But you don't talk about shame to fit in, and suddenly you have an asymmetry because you talk about joy, but you don't talk about shame. Now you've created an asymmetry in order to fit into the norm, because the culture itself is cult-like. It's out of symmetry. When you can talk about the good things but not the bad things, every time you complain, someone says, be positive, be positive. And every time you're positive, nobody says, look at the downside. You see, Buffett, when he makes billions of dollars in Berkshire Hathaway for his clients, he looks at the downside more than the upside. Protect, it's a golden rule in investing, you protect the downside. And then you work to get as much upside as you can within the framework of protecting the downside. And one of the reasons for that is in investing, if you lose 50% of the value of your portfolio, you have to gain 100% of your value to just be back where you were. You see? So it's actually more important to protect the loss than it is to focus on the gain. 1. 2, psychologically, loss hurts us more than not fully seized gain. So, if you have a friend and they die, it really bothers us because we lost a friend. But if we never had the friend to begin with, it doesn't bother us as much. You see, so psychologically, loss is a bigger pain source than, in many ways, gains is a pleasure source. So when someone says, don't look at the negative, just be positive, expect the best, that's not what Buffett does to work. It's also not what Bill Gates did in a study, constructive pessimism. Constructive pessimism was the single most successful sector in the field because what Gates did, and he's a constructive pessimist when he was forming Microsoft, is he was terrified of losing. He was terrified of being eaten up by a bigger company. So he was always strategizing, coming up with contingency plans, anxiously building up cash reserves. Microsoft used to have, even when it was a young company, $30 billion in cash to buy back its own stock in the event of a hostile takeover, to buy up a competitor if a new, better technology. It wasn't hard to do better than Windows. So when a nice new invention came along that was way better than Windows, they would just buy it up with their cash reserves and kill it so that Windows could survive. And so in this framework, the fear-based, what could go wrong and how can we protect that, is actually part of the dance. Meaning you don't just go out in the car and say, seatbelts. Let's be positive. The universe has a plan. And if it's meant to be, we will arrive without seatbelts at the destination. You look at the statistics and you look at the upside, you look at the downside, you balance it all out. So that's not only your job, but it's your job as a screen for professionals. Meaning when you're working with the latest thing or the person you've got to have a session with so-and-so, what's their diagnosis protocol? Well, it's like, no. I just do this. I come in here and I massage you like this and this and this and this, and it helps people. Well, it could be that particular protocol, and massage is one of the more benign, things, could benefit 85% of patients, and the other 15 just don't come back. So 15% of people are harmed or don't get much result, and they don't schedule another session, and the other 85 feel invigorated. And so that's and so you could just take your bets with that. If you see a large sampling of people, you say, well, I'm part of that pool. I'll just do that and see what happens. But as a general rule, you want someone to do a diagnosis and communicate it and look at what we're trying to make whole. Because if they cannot do that, meaning if they don't ask the questions to begin with, they just apply the dogma. Hemp seed, it's for everyone. More hemp, you have no idea. And they start rambling around the history of hemp and all that. And you need to wear hemp clothing. And, it's like, okay, but is that really the best way to cure an earache? Oh, I'm sure it wouldn't do any harm. And so you want people to be interested in you and able to articulate the imbalance and have a statistical assessment that, this will do it 50% of the time, this will do it 80% of the time, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you've got to do most of the work to grow beyond the session. And here's a format. You can go to therapy, and I've done therapy, 4 hours a week, for example, for a few years, and didn't do anything outside of the therapy. And I didn't grow. My wife, on the other hand, much smarter than I am, would do 15 minutes of coaching a day, and then she'd work her ass off, 4 hours a day to apply the coaching, and she grew like mad. So 15 minutes of coaching leveraged into change in activity transformed her life in a matter of months, whereas I'm doing 4 hours of therapy and, just going and talking. It's like, oh, this is what happened since here. And, oh, yeah, and then I did this, and then I did that. And, oh, very interesting. Time's up, and then you go off and, do it all over again. So it's the work that you do, the changes that you make in thinking, in feeling, and in action that are going to pivot the life. And there should be a good return on that in general. Now, talk therapy, if you've got deeply suppressed things that you are ashamed of, bringing that out to the open can be, very healing and cathartic if you feel unlovable around that. And that's a good example where talking can be enough. But you've got to know what you're dealing with and what you're trying to treat. And is it working? Or are you now just dependent on the therapist and everyone else will hate you when they find out that you think this or whatever? And now this brings me actually to an important point. It's number 14, but it ties in here. Your feelings are always right. Meaning whatever it is that you feel is always right. Now, the heart is a scientific instrument. Now, it's abstracted as if it's somehow you have feelings that are separate from your body. Like, these are my sensations, but these are my feelings. They're really all in the body. But the heart itself has a matrix of nerve endings and connections with the brain that are a synergy in a certain way of the physical sensations and the thoughts in a way that, that you give rise to something that doesn't feel just physical. It's a synergy. And yet it is being produced within the instrument. And I'm using this as a technical term, and it's why I'm emphasizing that your feelings are always right. If you have a thermometer and you put it in cold water, that's 32 degrees below zero or whatever it is, or it's a liquid that doesn't freeze, and basically the thermometer that will read 32 degrees below zero. If you put the thermometer in a volcano that's 58,000 degrees, assuming the thermometer goes that high, you'll have 58,000 degrees reading on the digits. The instrument of a thermometer doesn't lie. So if you want the thermometer to go down, it's reading 58,000 degrees, and you want it to read 5 degrees. You don't shout at the thermometer, judge the thermometer, attack the thermometer, break the thermometer to try and get it to 5 degrees. You move the thermometer out of the volcano, and you find an environment that is 5 degrees. And lo and behold, the thermometer will read 5 degrees. When your sister is being raped, when your mother is bitching and complaining, when your teachers fail to validate your soul, when your dad complains about your grades rather than asking what your dreams are, you may feel depressed. If you feel depressed, it is an accurate representation of the environment that is depressing you. The instrument of the human heart was designed to make us conscious of our environment on an emotional level. So it's like, an intelligent response to I am depressed is, what is depressing you? You look around and you say, well, I would love to be able to go out in the sun, but I'm not going to be able to do that all month. Even in a month, I'll be too busy to go out in the sun. So I'm sad about that. I hate doing what I'm doing. I don't like this bit. This bit hurts my hand. This bit hurts my eyes. Da, 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 da. You say, okay. So that is what is depressing you. Now, if you can pull it off, go out into the sun, resign the job, get away from that constant nagging, and notice what the reading is then. I feel so much happier. Well, where are you? Well, I'm in nature, I see. So be out in nature more. What kind of nature? Well, it's this kind of nature. I like the water the most and this kind of weather. Okay, so where does that kind of weather happen? And where is that kind of water? It's like, I'm a sea person. I'm a night person. You know, I have these thoughts at night, and I like sleeping in. And okay, so stay up at night and sleep in, and spend time doing this, and then notice, listen to the instrument of your heart. Now, unfortunately, and this is the challenge of living, the culture has no interest in your heart. It is a chauvinistic culture. It has interest in a number of different things other than our hearts. And so the fact that you come alive and are happy and wonderful might count for something in Bhutan, where they have a gross national happiness metric. But in the United States, where they have GNP and GDP, they don't care if you're happy. They care if you are producing 10,000 widgets or 12,000 widgets a week. And you're worth more if you are miserable and producing 12,000 widgets than if you are happy and producing 9,000 widgets. So widgets over happiness, that's part of the asymmetry. So, you've got to mediate this within the culture. And the reason that I say your feelings are never wrong is that while they are not always accurate, they are accurate for what you think you're measuring. Meaning, many of us are mildly insane because we live in a very insane culture. So there are areas where we think, for example, just as one example, Americans will choose an extra hour of overtime over an extra hour of sleep if given the choice. So you ask 100 Americans, would you like to make more money and work an extra hour of overtime, one, or would you like to have an extra hour of great sleep? Well, the majority of Americans will pick the overtime and the money. Now, you then take the Americans that picked the overtime, and then you take the Americans that picked the sleep, and you evaluate their happiness. And the people who slept more, an extra hour, and skipped the overtime, are significantly happier. So, but the people who picked the overtime thought they would be happier. Okay, so you've got people with an erroneous map. They're out of touch with the data. So why did they pick the overtime? Did they pick it so they would be miserable? No, they were imagining shopping. Now, and shopping as being a rather addictive process doesn't create, long-term sustainable happiness. But they could imagine like, an extra hour of overtime a day. Let's see, I could buy jeans, this, and so they're imagining that. They're not imagining how they'd feel, because we don't teach feelings. So that would be a kind of a weird thing to think about for an American. So they're not imagining how they would feel if they slept for an hour. And so they have been told, because we have sold our minds to advertisers. That's another choice that we thought would make us happy. Meaning, you ask Americans if they want free media. Oh, I want free media. And you ask Americans if they mind getting advertised to for their free media. Oh, well, I don't like the ads, but I'll just tune it out. It's no big deal. I want free media. And, after 30,000 ads, you are completely insane. You make choices like you even stay up all night not sleeping to watch ads on the shopping channel, etc. And you are told over and over again how to be insane. You are told that if you buy this watch, you will be next to a smooth-skinned, sexy goddess who has all the time in the world for you. And you buy the watch and the woman in the TV ad doesn't appear. But there's another item out there. And so having made the deal with the devil to sell out the map of reality to the corporations who pay for the ad so we can get things for free, we then have these bizarre notions that being able to buy more junk that we don't need is going to make us happier than sleeping an appropriate amount for our the body that's only been here for 5 billion years and knows exactly how much sleep it needs, which didn't change just because we sold out our mind to the media. So when you have an inaccurate map of reality, you now have a situation where, let's go back to the question. So we have delusional Americans who think they're going to be happier if they can buy things, but who would actually be happier if they could sleep. And you give them the choice and you say, I'm not going to let you work an hour of overtime. I'm taking that choice off the table. Whether you like it or not, you are going to sleep for an extra hour a day. Now, in an actual sane map of reality, they would be celebrating, yes, less harm to the environment, less junk, less materialism, more time to reflect, more lucid dreaming, more energy, yes, more happiness, more time with the family, less stress, less irritate. I'll be more relaxed. I'll fight less with my wife. Hooray! Hooray for more sleep. This is an informed heart referencing actual data. But we do not have informed hearts. We have brainwashed hearts referencing the wrong data. And so we will have a tantrum. How dare you tell me that I have to sleep? I need to get ahead. I've got to buy a pair of Gucci shoes. You have no idea. How dare you? And we will have a tantrum. And so how is it that the feelings are always right? The feelings are always an accurate representation of our beliefs, of our thoughts, of our correlations, of our bodies. Meaning, you take a finger, you hit it, and all things being equal, you will feel bad. It's like, my finger's bad. Now, you build up a big cultish program around the same thing. It's called Survivor. You build up a big cultish program around the same thing, and you say, who's going to be the champion? Who can endure the pain? Will be the champion of our cult. And it is a cult because these are absurd things to participate in. Who will be the champion? Who can endure the most hammer to their thing? They will get $1 million. They will be all over the media. Being all over the media is a good thing, we are told. All the famous people tell you it's terrible, but we still believe, if only we could be famous, so we're again miseducated. So now suddenly people are competing. Try my finger. You can hit it harder, harder. So this is where you have the physiological thing is one thing, but the deepest connection tends to be psychological, the meaning. Meaning if someone, for example, you have a man who can't provide for his family because he's a military man with PTSD. He understands he's hurting his children because his military will not help him cure his PTSD. And he's having explosive rages. He understands that people are scared of him. He cannot fix it. He can't stand who he's become. He's got $1 million life insurance for the family, and he believes that his family will be provided for and will be safer if he's dead. He may be very happy as he picks up the gun and pulls the trigger. Now, anyone who understands that he had to make this choice might be outraged at the U.S. military's cowardice in its delayed research on PTSD, its cover-up of domestic violence, its whitewashing of the issue, its underfunding veterans, it's going into wars we don't need. We didn't need Iraq. Why have you created a new generation of PTSD? Why have you created all the children of that? It's absolutely barbaric. So you may be angry about that, but my point is, it's the story. So the guy pulling the trigger may feel the happiest he's felt in his whole life. I've done my job. My family has a life insurance. My son is no longer going to be hit by me. I'm sacrificing my life for my family. This is the best choice I have available. Boom. He's delighted. Accomplished the plan. It's the psychological, meaning the feelings are a map of our beliefs, of our thoughts, of our expectations, and sensations. Meaning the butt on the temple didn't feel good, but knowing what it meant, Viktor Frankl says we can endure any what if we have a why, if we have the right why. If this is, children in Thailand. I see them sometimes in Western companies. They're isolated from their families. They're in absolute misery, working 6 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day, constant grind, dealing with Westerners complaining. But their why? They're building a house for their family. And they're proud of that. And so the feeling is, and of course, in America, the question would be, what are you thinking of? It's all about you. You see, don't throw your life away for those old people, the American attitude, Live your life to the fullest. So, and then you think, oh, that's right. I should be enjoying this. So when I say your feelings are always correct, I mean they are an accurate read of what's going on inside and outside of you. You will not change your feelings unless you change your environment or the map of meaning. It's that simple. The purpose of feelings is to help you understand what's creating them, be conscious of that, and to participate, to co-create an environment that produces more, less unnecessary suffering at the very least. So this framework, so the feelings are constant. We always are feeling something in the present if we're paying attention. And so their purpose is to guide our consciousness into what we are responding to. I feel angry at my cousin because she just earned $1 million at the lottery. Why? Are you angry at her because you're expecting to make $3 million at the lottery yourself in a day or two and it's a sure thing? Or are you angry at her because the culture says that now she's more important to you because she's going to have all these people pampering her because she's now rich and could spend things in their business, and you've got nothing? So anyway, let's move to a couple of things. Next thing. So 2, know the costs. As much as possible, you want to know the statistics of something, and you want practitioners that are interested in the statistics, because everything is a cost-benefit analysis. Unlike the delusion that there's free media, no, we've just brainwashed ourselves and our children to pay for the media, to buy things that we don't need that cost more than the media cost to produce. So no free lunch. Good old Milton Friedman. So the statistics, you want to look at something that, like, for example, if you could have an 85% chance of winning in Vegas, and you could place 100 bets in Vegas, do it. With 85% odds, 99% of people will walk out of Vegas after 100 bets with significantly more money, if that's the goal. If you've got an 85% chance that this will increase your health, and particularly if it's, and then you look at the downside. And we have different shapes of resources. So, if there's an 85% chance that you'll have a 10% healthier kidney if you spend $30,000, if you've got, over a few $100,000, do it in a heartbeat. If you've got $5,000 and this means going into debt, and going into debt means taking a job you don't like to get yourself out of debt, it may not be a good choice for you because of the profile of the resources you have versus those that are needed. So you want to look at the statistics. And you want to look at statistics with particular therapists and look at it in a time and money versus other options. Now, here's a good example. I like Audible a lot. And every Audible book costs me $9.95 because I buy a minimum of 23 a year. I usually buy 50 to 100 books a year. $9.95. And I can listen while I'm cooking. I can listen while I'm walking. I can actually enjoy going for a walk that I wouldn't go on without an Audible book, and which gives me exercise, which my body needs. And so there's a ripple effect. When I'm driving, I'm cooking, I'm eating, I'm hot tubbing, I'm walking, I'm sitting quietly with my wife. I've got Audible. Now, if I can study someone like John Gottman, who's one of the few therapeutic relationship scientists in our culture, for $9.95 on Audible, and I remember listening to his book on trust, and every hour or so in the book, I would get up and do something he suggested in the book with my partner at the time, and our relationship would go up like 20% in value. So listen to an hour of John Gottman. I haven't done that with my partner. Let me give her a call and say that and do that, and pause the Audible book, get up, do it. Every hour of John Gottman, my relationship with my partner at the time went up 20%. Well, I've never gotten that result from a therapist. Now, every hour at the therapist takes an hour to get there, an hour to get back, $100 to $200 for the session, gas into the atmosphere, and sometimes I come out of there feeling worse. So, meanwhile, every hour of John Gottman costs less than $1, don't have to leave the house, act, and my relationship improves. So what I'm looking at is you want to sample different things with a reasonable risk and preferably sharing the risk. A good ethical practitioner does not want you to spend money and time on a crapshoot, help some people, and didn't help you, and you go away with $600 less money. An ethical, knowledgeable therapist is interested in asking the questions, is this good for you? Okay. And you need to tell them. It's like, money is tight. What would you do if you couldn't hire you? Where would you go? Well, I'd start by reading this $10 book. Then I would do this, this, and this. Save up some money so it's not a stress, and then maybe come back. So that's what I would do. And so you want to partner with your practitioner to let them know the full picture, because nothing is absolute is partly what I'm saying. If you've got $1 million, it's probably worth trying many of them as long as they're doing a diagnosis as opposed to just doing their thing, because you can actually make something worse. You can be dehydrated, and talk to someone who says don't drink too much water. It drains out your minerals, and then you're dead. And the best practitioners are ongoingly interested in learning, meaning they're asking you questions, they're taking notes, they're studying things, they're referencing papers. Like I read this in this journal, that there's an 87%. They're interested in the cost-benefit analysis because that's in your interest. Now, the third thing to understand is what to do therapy for. And I'll give an example in my life. The inability of a child to bond emotionally when both parents are afraid of their own feelings leads to an insecure emotional attachment with both parents. This makes it much harder to regulate and deal with gradations, with the normal bell curve of interactions, where this person is an acquaintance, this is a somewhat good friend, this is a great friend. When you lack regulating templates that come from being able to bond with your parents, they tend to be more extreme. And it's hard to get them back because they're in unconscious regions of the brain. They occur pre-verbally, these templates of connecting. So I have insecure attachment disorder, meaning I can bond very tightly or have nothing to do with someone. It's difficult outside of a professional container to, I can't have casual sex as just one example. It's not necessarily that it's a good idea anyway, but it just, that doesn't work, because it just doesn't work. So I have to connect deeply or separate. Now, in that sense, I also experience rejection very painfully. So rejection is a painful trigger point. And so there are situations where I've written a letter to someone online and they didn't reply at all, or they just wrote not interested. And it upset me for days. Now, in a regulatory sense, on a mental level, I'm just saying, oh, good, you're not the one, because I don't treat people that rudely. And you don't even have the curiosity and humility to understand that nothing, that a person can't fit into a profile. So you don't know what you don't know, and you're dismissing that unknown. And I also happen to know there's a lot in that unknown category that people find very unique and interesting about me, but you don't have the humility to see it. So, okay, well, that is going to be a negative in an ongoing relationship. Someone who doesn't know what they don't know and has no interest in exploring that. That's a big negative. So good. But this other part of me, this emotional part, really takes the hit. That 1.5-year-old little boy reaching for approval and not experiencing that takes a huge hit. And this is maddening in a place like the San Francisco Bay Area, where there is an overabundance of group activities and a scarcity of quality one-on-one time that is spontaneous, which is my favorite kind of time. Now, I talked about this for years with therapists. It's like, it's so draining, it's so, And they will sit there and take your money to hear again and again how draining it is, how painful it is, Now, I decided that rather than pay for therapists, I would go on a world trip and look to see if there was any place in the world where this didn't happen. So I discovered it happens 3 times less in Copenhagen. Great. So if I want to experience 3 times less pain on that area and 3 times more spontaneous great dates with wonderful people, go to Copenhagen. I learned that it's twice as enjoyable in Italy. Again, so 3 times better in Copenhagen, twice as good in Italy. It's about the same in the United Kingdom. Not much difference in France. Then I learn it's 20 times more enjoyable in the Philippines. Not bad. And it's 5 to 10 times, it's about 10 times more in Thailand. So if I'm in Thailand, I will spend more warm, emotional, quality time spontaneously in a month than I will in an entire year in the Bay Area. As a stranger. I mean, I can just sit down in a cafe and get in a conversation with the cafe owner that is more heartfelt, warmth, and enjoyable. And sometimes that'll just extend after hours. It's like, well, we've chatted for 3 hours. Well, we'll close the cafe. Here, have dinner with us. Let's talk some more. And that's Thailand. This is the Bay Area. So 1,000% difference. That statistic doesn't change with therapy. It changes with action. Meaning, if you want to experience something that your culture is hostile towards, and the Bay Area is hostile towards feminine energy that is spontaneous, emotional, and lasts more than 4 hours in a quality one-on-one format. Now, for groups, it's great. If you want to dance in a crowd and wear snazzy outfits and focus on that and then go home without talking with anyone, fine. If you want to dance and do your own thing and have people turn away from you as you're dancing to make sure you don't get any ideas, well, fine. But if you want to have spontaneous quality time, you have to go to a place where that is nurtured. And that's a very big distinction to make. You don't want to do therapy. An example would be salt as well. If your body is low sodium and so you're tired and strained and irritable, you go to a therapist and they listen to how strained and tired and irritable you are. You can talk about that for the next 20 years, and until you start eating more salt, you will be irritable and strained. You've got to segment that, because my criticism of therapists is that they do not do their homework to show any interest outside their field. So the typical therapist is going to take $20,000 to listen to the irritability you feel because you don't have enough salt in your body, with zero interest in understanding your diet, zero wondering and curiosity about why you're continuing to be irritable, and with no refund if you discover after $20,000 that you went to a naturopath and they prescribe salt and suddenly you're not irritable. The therapist will be delighted for you. They just don't make the connection that it's actually part of a professional's ethic to gauge if the problem you're going to them for. I mean, take the same analogy. Imagine if you hired a gutter cleaner to wash your windows, but they didn't. They just cleaned the gutter, and the windows were still dirty. And they cleaned the gutter again, and the windows were still dirty. And 20 years later, they had racked up a considerable bill to clean the gutters once a week, and the windows were still dirty. And then you discover that what cleans the windows is wiping the windows, not doing the gutters. And they say, oh, that's what it was. Well, glad you got that sorted out. I guess we'll be off. You see, this kind of thing doesn't happen in physical areas because we are technologically literate. We focus on masculine energy, so we would not tolerate that. We would not tolerate paying someone $200 to clean the windows. They clean the gutters, and they say sometimes it takes a little time. You got to give this time. And they come back and they clean the gutters 5 or 6 more times. And then you say, really? They say, well, we could try this. I could clean the gutters, quote, windows, with this other thing. There's this new product. Costs a few $1,000s, but, we could really get these gutters into top shape, these windows/gutters. And so they do it again. The windows are still dirty. And eventually you drift apart because it's always hire us to do more gutter work. And that's the state that we're in many healing modalities today, where the healer does not know what they don't know. They don't understand the different dimensions in ecology. They don't do a diagnosis. They make more money if things fail. And they have a general paradigm that it's all the client's issues. So, for example, a therapist can go on endlessly, just like they showed that in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. A sane person got into the insane asylum, and so of course they must be really insane if they think they're sane. Very dangerous, and so you can't let them out as long as they think they're sane. They've got to admit that you're right and they're dumb and they're idiots, and then once they've admitted that and you've driven them insane, then you can give them medication and they can slowly show recovery. And if they do it in your little prescribed box, you will finally say that they're no longer a danger to society, but keep an eye on them and you'll have damaged a healthy person and send them out under your little narrow box. The same can happen in therapy. You go to therapy, it doesn't work, like the salt analogy, etc., and you start getting irritable with the therapist, and they invite you to talk about your irritation. And you get impatient with having to pay to talk about your irritation with the therapist. And they invite you to talk about your impatience. In other words, they pathologize the symptoms of their own misdiagnosis because they never did a diagnosis, because they don't have a framework in which to work, but they will keep taking your money as long as you don't make it too uncomfortable, or until they have other clients. And Nassim Taleb, in The Black Swan and various research around that, pointed out a wonderful statistic, which is that, a wonderful data set, which is that you have to be competent in an area to know if you are competent. Meaning a good painter not only knows if they're a good painter, but can spot good and bad painting. A good painter can. A bad painter doesn't know if they're a good painter or not and can't spot that in others. Now, with, again, physical stuff, we know someone who paints all over the glass window is a bad painter. The trouble is, and so we have cues with that. The customer will help a bad painter know that they're a bad painter by not paying their bill. But again, in these chauvinistically marginalized areas of emotion and inner work, we don't know what good and bad is. And so we don't know if we're good enough to know what good or bad is. So we follow these dogmas. Again, it's hemp, it's grapeseed oil, it's this, it's that, it's margarine. No, it's butter, it's whole milk, it's skim milk, it's homogenized milk, it's pasteurized. No, it's raw milk. Which is it? Well, and you have people spout a single source, etc., without looking at the overall picture. It's a complex reality. And so you want someone who understands this and is interested in this. One way to tell competency is a competent person lights up when you are interested in some of this domain. Because a competent person is in the minority in this field, meaning there may be as little as 5%. There may be as little as 2%. Meaning if you interview 100 therapists, there may only be 2 that respond expansively and excitedly to this type of conversation. Now, this is a little bit of a problem because a lot of people who are going to therapists are afraid of rejection. And an incompetent therapist will be angry if you point out their incompetence, and they will reject you. So if you need acceptance, and you're dealing with a statistical framework in which a majority of people are not optimal. They may be better than nothing or not, depending on the situation, but certainly not optimal. And you're trying to find someone that's optimal. And you've got to have 30 angry therapists at you that say, well, that's not how people do it. No one asked me that before. Why are you, just come in and do some sessions. I'm here for you. Just pay the money. You'll find out in 6 months. I'm going to go, and you have to go through 30 angry therapists, and you're thinking, these are the compassionate people? And, well, you're going to be feeling rejected 30 times, so you may settle for an incompetent therapist who doesn't really help with the issue, but they don't attack you, because why would they attack someone who is paying them money to just sit there and not challenging the fact that nothing's happening, because nothing does happen in a noticeable percentage of therapy. So learn to interview your therapist. This is your work again. And here are a few things that I didn't ask and regret not asking in my $150,000 of paid work. So, do you have an intake form, and may I see it? This is actually asking, do they do any diagnosis, or do they just say, come on and have a seat? Now, I know this as a landscape contractor, because when clients would intuitively just share bits and pieces, we would invariably have to throw out the whole design and start over again, because we'd be halfway through this based on what they'd said so far, and then it looks like we've made a good decision. And then they say, honey, where's the boat going to go? And I'm like, what boat? What boat? And they say, well, we're going to have a boat. We're going to have to park it. It's about 40 feet long. We were thinking around the side, and it's like, why didn't you tell me about the boat? This whole design has to be thrown out. There's no room for your boat in this design, and if this changes, then this has to change, and if that changes, then that has to change, and that changes the cost, and all over again. Like, oh, well. And I just got tired of that, and so I created a questionnaire. Do you plan to have a boat? If so, how long? Do you want a hot tub? Will you be needing gas run out to any area of the garden? Do you need electrical outlets out here? Do you want intercoms set up? Do you want lighting? Do you want LED or incandescent bulbs? Do you want a gazebo? Do you want this style or this style? Is maintenance more important than real estate value, or real estate value more important than maintenance? How much do you want to spend? So I have all these questionnaires. And if a client is sane, meaning they understand the connection between their own questions, because some clients are insane, meaning they say they want roses and they want low maintenance, and you explain to them that roses are high maintenance. And they say, yes, I know, but I want roses in a low maintenance garden. And it's like, you want high maintenance plants in a low maintenance garden. And they're like, yes. It's like, well, that's not how the world works. You have to decide between high-maintenance roses and low-maintenance garden. Like, oh, that's a tough one. You mean I can't have low-maintenance roses? No. And it can go on like that, dozens of times in their questionnaire. They want maximum real estate value, and they want to do a purple sculpture that almost nobody will like. Well, nobody will give you more money for your house for that purple sculpture. Well, I want a purple sculpture. You can have a purple sculpture in a devalued house. No, but I want to make money on my house. No, it's one or the other. If you want to make money, we can do this, and you can have a sculpture like this, and 80% of the market will give you more money for that. Oh, I see. But I don't like that. So it's what you like, or it's the real estate value based on the statistics. Now, you could luck out. There may be 1 in 10,000 who comes around at the right time, and they've been longing for that purple sculpture. But usually the one that wants that kind of weird purple sculpture wants it to be about them. So they don't want your purple sculpture because the whole point of the purple sculpture was for you to make a statement that you're different. And how can they be different if they're liking your purple sculpture? They want their own purple sculpture. They want to say, no, do it all differently, and so you've got bad odds. So you want an intake form, and you want it to be intelligent enough to note things so that they would have a sense of whether or not they could help you, and to be humble that they may not be the right person. 1. Do they have an outtake form? This is also important to look at. What data are they gathering about their own success? For example, do they contact, if they're a relationship therapist, do they gather statistics? How many people improve their relationship under therapy? How many people make the relationship worse? How many people it doesn't change? 6 months later, how many people, are they gathering the statistic to show that it works? So for example, the clients that hired me to improve real estate value, I would interview the people that bought their house. And 80% of the time, when I had designed the landscape, the buyer would tell me that the landscape made the sale. So that tells me I'm on track 80% of the time to increase real estate value. And it would not only make the sale, but add value. And when I built my own house and integrated it with landscaping, again, it sold above appraised value in a down market. And I asked the buyer why she bought my house, and she said it's the only thing with this kind of integrated landscape. So, that's a data set it's research on the other side. So what's the outtake form? What is the therapist's self-assessment of what they're good at and they're bad at in the domain you're going to be covering? How do they rate themselves 1 to 10? If they have no idea, probably means they're not doing intakes and outtakes form. If they're flustered by it, it's not a good sign. What's their training? How many years and what were the modules and stuff? And could you see the course material, etc.? Do you have was there a trauma module? Was it this? Did you look at sexual abuse? Are you aware of how to handle shame in this type of dynamic or not? What's your protocol? Particularly if you want to deal with something, you could say, what's your protocol for dealing with someone who has repressed sexual memories, just as an example. And if they say, well, we just talk, and if they come up, they come up. That's a pretty general protocol. That's talk therapy at its most basic. We just talk, and if it comes up, it comes up. Now, there are people, this is not to throw that out, there are people, again, a small percentage, maybe it's 5%, 2%, that are such great listeners that amazing things come out with a very vague protocol because of their presence, because their body responds, they're interested, they love you, they care about you, etc., etc. But often, if you love and care about the person, your clients, you take the time to study, often. So that's an important thing. And do they have peer review and support? Now, this is a really important thing. So imagine you're in therapy and you're going through crisis, and your therapist's husband leaves them, and it ties in with a little bit of your crisis. And first of all, your therapist doesn't get enough sleep, and then secondly, they're tired because they have to do extra chores because the husband isn't doing this. And then they're triggered around this, and they're anxious waiting for the call, so they're not as present for you. And you're dealing with a similar thing, and you just don't feel supported. Well, that can happen. And, the therapist doesn't know what to do. It's like, I'm not at my best, I'm sorry. And I've had healers and therapists say that. I'm a bit sick myself, I'm not at my best. They usually always charge full price for the session that they're not in their best in. Little ethical issue there. But the peer review and support, do they have someone that can tell you whether I'm a client that's starting to trigger you too much? that when you have it set up, that anytime you get elevated heartbeat and stuff, you check in once a week and they ask you, and you have a place to say, I'm getting triggered here and I need to see you get to someone who can help, or I'd like my support person to sit in on us and make sure that I'm really giving you the job that you deserve. That's a great framework of support. And so, look to science, and which I've already referenced John Gottman, because he's one of the few in the field. Your expectations and your needs, I think, are important to articulate. What are they? Being on time, I want a therapist who doesn't take long vacations or who I can talk with. Note your expectations and needs. I think a really good thing to do starting is to establish a protocol of diagnosis and then a protocol of measuring success, and then ask your therapist to agree. So let's look at what we're going to do. This is our hypothesis that this is the diagnosis. You think that based on my questionnaire answers, that what would really help me is some trauma work. The best plan that we've come up with, I'm going to read The Body Keeps the Score. I'm going to read Healing Trauma. I'm going to do some tapping exercises. I'm going to get a family history from my sister. We're going to talk about this and notice if there are any terrain that brings up anxiety, and I start changing the subject and show divergent patterns and fight, flight, freeze symptoms. And then we're going to do this. And by this date, we should have this result in some form, or we're off track and we're going to re-diagnose, or you can go work with someone else. So establish, we should see success like this. You should be more confident, or you should know what trauma is and what your needs are. And so establish it and enlist the therapist in that. Meaning if they're like, well, the universe works in mysterious ways, well, so does your pocketbook. So if they're happy for money to appear in mysterious ways as mysterious events occur, then that's a fair trade. We'll just see what happens. If anything does happen, I'll give you some money. And if it doesn't, then I won't, because the universe works in mysterious ways and you have to have trust in the universe. So a measurement of success. Your therapist has issues. Make sure they're not your issues, I think, is another just awareness. Now, I'd love to see therapists do a much more in-depth bio, like a 10-page to 20 pages would probably be pretty good, like examples of what went wrong in their therapy, examples of what went really well, where they're uncertain, where they see themselves. And I think an ethical thing to do is to give that to a client prior to the first session, so you have a sense of what you're dealing with. And if people have charges, like my sister was raped by an African American, and there's just some part of me, it's not a rational part, where I just feel rage at men about that. And every therapist has issues. The thing is, you want to make sure that's not your issue, because they can't help you if they're triggered and traumatized with something in your work that touches them. And a good therapist will disclose this. What are the big trigger points in your life? And if they don't know, they have not done their therapy. And it's a reasonable thing to kind of map out the terrain a little bit and say, look, I'm trying to improve my sex life. Well, if the first reaction in the therapist is, men, they're always interested in sex, that's not a therapist that can improve your sex life. That's a therapist that can punish you for your interest in sex. So your therapist does have issues. Make sure they're not your issues. And it's a tricky thing Most therapists don't like turning the spotlight on themselves, but the way I experience it a noticeable percentage of the time is that I get near areas and I feel a static energy in my own body around that that's telling me that their body is not in flow around that topic. So that's where I sense the charge. So my anxiety goes up, and this cough is part of the repressed stuff that I've held for many of my therapists. My body anxiety goes up to let me know that their body anxiety is going up, which should be letting them know they've got triggered and unresolved stuff in that domain. Now, here's a tricky thing. This is a good conversation to have with your therapist. And if all of this seems a little bit much, and it could be, because this could be 4 hours of interview and assessment, well, you can't do this with 100 therapists to find the two, and you shouldn't be paying 4 hours for do this with 100 therapists. But I'd like to see, like when I hired my assistant, who's now the best employee of my entire life, when I hired Devang, I was not sure he was the one. I didn't feel any emotional connection. And so I said, Devang, make me a website about you that convinces me to hire you. And this had several filters. So first of all, when he said, sure, it's like, he's interested in helping me. That's what I need. 2, I said, when will it be done by? He said, 48 hours. I thought that's a prompt response. I like that. He said, I said, okay, the moment it's done, send me the link. Well, he sent me the link in 46 hours. I thought he's early, he is responsive. And then I looked at the website, and I was just so impressed that he was interested. In other words, this is a filter. If you intelligently challenge your professional to demonstrate their interest in helping you, and they do, they will by definition be a minority. A majority is going to be stuck on, this is not how clients behave. No one ever asked me that before. That's not how I do things. You're supposed to show up, and I'm supposed to say, relax, I'm here for you. And then whatever happens, I'll just be polite and take some notes, and you'll pay me, and you're supposed to get better. In fact, if you don't get better, it's your fault, because my textbook says you should be getting better. And so, I just have some very difficult clients, apparently. For 10 years, they haven't been getting better because they're so messed up. And it has nothing to do with me. I'm doing my protocol. And that's all there is to it. And so you want to filter those people out. And the best way to do that is intelligently show interest in the field. Don't be lazy. That doesn't excite experts. Experts have tons of lazy customers who are not going to do their homework, not going to follow through, who have no interest in growing, etc. And that's no fun for the practitioner. So a great practitioner is looking for a committed and interesting client, and that's where the synergy is. Someone who is interested in the field and growing, meeting someone like you, who's interested in not just wasting money and being a couch potato, but growing. Anyway, ideally, I don't know if you'd get away with it, given the amount of hostility in the therapist that I've encountered to the slightest hint that they might be able to improve, things. But if you can get away with helping them, telling them to build a website, or offering to tell them, make a video about this, write 20 pages about this, spread this, and you'll pay for a website. You could be helping, build a meme and learning something, useful about them, and most importantly, filtering out those that are curious and interested in, this or better. I can't do that, but I'll send you an article I wrote here. Then there's this book that describes a lot of what I've trained with here. And why don't you read those and see if that fits for you? That's a good indicator of partnering, which brings to the next issue, which is coach your therapist. You know yourself, hopefully, better than anyone else. If you don't know yourself better than someone else, be cautious of abuse. What I mean by that is it is natural for you to be aware of your own truth. That's natural. Now, if you are not, what this suggests as a relatively noticeable probability is that when you tried to express your truth, you were shut down. Now, this doesn't mean physically hit. Little infants read eyes and faces. So if your parents' eyes tighten like this every time you try and tell them that you love them, because they're scared to say I love you because it feels vulnerable and they're terrified of being vulnerable, well then you're going to stop saying that you love them and you're going to start saying the thing that makes your parents feel relaxed. And maybe just saying, I'm cool, I don't care, I don't need you. If that's what makes your parents relax, then the love that you feel migrates over into the translation that your parents are comfortable hearing on their face. And by the time you have language, you've forgotten all about this. But you don't know what you want because everything you wanted made your parents scared, angry, violent, they avoided you, they gave you the language of energy and gesture at such an intensity that you thought it would be better off lying and being liked than it would be to tell the truth and be a terrifying reject in the family system. And so that's how that works. So when you say, I don't know, what you're saying is, I knew when I was 6 months old, and what I knew was not welcome. So I tuned it all out and masked it, and that's what you need to get back. You need to get back to knowing. And is this a therapist who can see the parts of you that want to come out that you don't know and can help you digest that? For example, in my clients, I look for the joy. And I also see the part that's shutting down the joy. Like one client of mine, she spent 60 grand, and the only point in the entire design that she lit up was around the idea of a tree house in the back garden. Now, the tree house would have cost a few $100s. The rest is 60 grand. Her complete body language was apathetic and dragged down around fitting in with the neighbors, which was all it was. I can't stand the way this looks. I've got to improve the neighborhood, The bit that made her really happy was the treehouse. But then she quickly said, I can't do that. I'm an old woman. What would people think? And she killed it off. And so the only thing that brought her joy was that authentic spark. And that's the bit that got killed off because what would the neighbors think? So that's where the life is, and that's where the abuse is. That she can't even afford a few $100s for the one spark of joy in her life, but she's has to, for the neighbors, spend tens of thousands to fit in, which gives her no pleasure whatsoever other than that she's not afraid of being judged. Well, that is an abuse template right there. And unfortunately, as a landscape designer, I can't take people into that psychotherapy because they're not expecting it. They don't want anyone to look at that. But in my view, she would have been better deleting the entire project and spending the few hundred on the treehouse than spending the 60,000 doing stuff to fit in with the neighbors and having no joy in it. The body is connected with the authentic self. So pick a growing therapist. What are some of the things that you've read in the last year that you really like? Now, if they say nothing, they're not keeping up with the field. They didn't like anything. Nothing came out around trauma, sexual abuse, latest drugs, new meditation, nothing. well, they're static. So that's caution. I would think that person is going to be 30% less valuable than someone who could say, well, there was this article in the Lancet, there was this book here, and I'm really interested in a shame dynamic that's showing up on Audible, and that's a growing person. Do they know trauma? This is a big one because trauma underlies 80% of the issues we deal with in our culture. 80% have a key and tie into trauma. It's also key because you can actually hurt someone. In therapy, you can re-traumatize someone with talk therapy if you don't know what you're doing. And so what have they studied around trauma? That's a really big thing. And emotional warmth. There again, knowing that the whole culture is chauvinistic, someone who is kind and emotionally warm around the whole issue is a really important thing in this. Can you create with someone an emotional warmth? Because that's going to be one of the most healing aspects from a cultural perspective, particularly if you're a man. And so this is the kind of guide to surviving therapy. A great therapist would actually have protocols that they wrote down to help develop their thinking, etc., and then take notes on how effective and ask clients to participate in the protocol design. Here's my list of protocols. This is my protocol for getting to know you. This is my protocol for responding to what I get to know you. This is my protocol for dealing with this kind of thing if it comes up. This is how I deal with holidays. This is how I deal if you have a crisis. And I'd like to review these and get your input as you're experiencing them. And also ahead of time, do these seem like the things that would have a reasonable chance of supporting you? And then after the fact, would you have changed any of those protocols? And if you break it down into bullets where, I listen to what the client says, I say absolutely nothing and look down until the client completes a sentence. I do that because I want you to know that you can have as much time as you want. Now, if someone's reading that and saying, oh, no, please, when I get lost like that and I'm not finishing a sentence, I would like some suggestion. I need help finding myself. Well, then you have to know if that therapist can do that. So anyway, I would love to hear if this works for you. I'd love to hear if you're a therapist and you develop any of these protocols. And good luck.